We're going to go ahead and get started with our program. We want to thank everybody for coming out, even in this storm that we have going here. So thank you guys for showing up. Good afternoon. My name is Terrell Odom. I'm the Associate Director in the Office for Military Affiliated Communities here at the University of Chicago, which is located within the Office of the Provost's Equal Opportunity Programs. First, I want to bring your attention to two different things before we get into the program. One, when you came in the door, you should see a billboard on the easel in the back where we received a letter of welcome on behalf of a true champion for veteran initiatives, the Honorable Senator Tammy Duckworth. The Honorable Duckworth writes, "It is my honor to welcome you to the University of Chicago's annual Veterans Day luncheon hosted by the Office for Military Affiliated Communities. I want to extend a special welcome to all veterans in attendance today. I applaud the University of Chicago's commitment to supporting student veterans by establishing OMAC, a campus-wide resource for veterans. The work that OMAC does empowers student veterans by providing them with administrative and financial resources to ensure their academic success. Your dedication to supporting student veterans' educational endeavors is invaluable and exemplifies how educational institutions can continue to serve student veterans. On this Veterans Day, I hope that each of us recognize that we are all deeply indebted to those who have honorably served our country and defended our freedoms. As we reflect upon their sacrifices, let us also recommit ourselves to ensure that our veterans are supported when they come home. By honoring the service and sacrifices of veterans on this day, we have the opportunity to let our service members know what their service means to us. Again, thank you, University of Chicago, for honoring and supporting our country's heroes. My very best to you all on this special occasion. Signed, the Honorable Senator Tammy Duckworth." Now, I would also like to call note to the red, white, and blue index cards that everybody has on their tables, along with the markers. And then over to my left, you'll see the wall of recognition. You have an opportunity to write a note or remembrance of a family member or a friend who has served our great nation, and you can post it up on our wall of recognition. At this time, we will play the U.S. Armed Forces Medley and ask that veterans or service members please rise as you hear your branch-specific medley, followed by the presentation of colors by University of Chicago ROTC, in which we will ask that everyone in the audience please stand, and then we'll have the playing of the national anthem.
Over hill, over dale, we will hit the dusty trail, and those caissons go rolling along. In and out, hear them shout,
United States Army.
and those caissons go rolling along. For it's high, high in the field artillery. Count out your numbers loud and strong. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And wherever you go, you will always know that those caissons go rolling along. Anchors aweigh, my
United States Navy.
farewell to college. Joys we sail and break on day, 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 day. Through our last night on shore, hail to the foe. Until we meet once more, here's wishing you a happy voyage home. We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in Thee. Through howling gale and shot and shell to win our victory. Sandberg Mirages is our guide, our pledge, our motto too. We're always ready, do or die.
States Air Force. United States Marine Corps.
To the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First we fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor free. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine. Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, the United States
Can everybody please stand? Thank you. Please be seated. At this time, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Provost Diermeyer. On behalf of Bridget Collier and Equal Opportunity Programs Office for Military Affiliated Communities, we would like to thank Provost Diermeyer for his forward-thinking, leadership, and steadfast support for the Office for Military Affiliated Communities. Daniel Diermeyer serves as the 13th Provost of the University of Chicago, where he is the David Lee Schilling Law Distinguished Service Professor at the Harris School of Public Policy and the college. He is a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Guggenheim Foundation, and the Canadian Institute of Advanced Research. Please join me in welcoming Provost Daniel Diermeyer.
Thank you for this kind introduction, and welcome everyone, and thank you for attending on this special day, even though winter came early a little bit. It may stay with us for a while, but it's early days. I also want to thank all of you for your service and for your sacrifice to our country. It's a special day to remember that and to keep that in mind, and I'm glad we could do it all together here at this luncheon. I'd also like to thank the members of the Equal Opportunity Programs and Career Advancement teams for their work. On behalf of our military-affiliated communities, Bridget Collier, Terrell Odom, Scott Velasquez, Mitchell Kitlos, Meredith Daw, and Bo Butts. Next, I'm excited to announce that the Harper Family Foundation has made an extraordinarily generous $10 million gift to provide scholarships for veterans attending Chicago Booth. Mike Harper, a 1950 graduate of Chicago Booth, served in the U.S. Army. He's a good friend and business associate. U.S. Marine Corps veteran Eric Leacher, or a speaker that many of you still remember from last year, had encouraged the foundation to double the impact of Eric's $10 million veteran scholarship gift in 2016. The university is extremely grateful for the Harper Family Foundation's support of our student veterans. The University of Chicago, as you all know, is a distinct community. What makes us distinct is our singular commitment to rigorous inquiry, and rigorous inquiry, for it to be possible, demands multiple, often competing perspectives and points of views. The nature of questions being asked and the questions being engaged are very often a function of the diversity of experiences, outlooks, and perspectives of those that are participating. In that regard, and many others, our support for veterans and their families is not only meant to make us better by representing a unique set of skills and experiences and honoring your service, it is germane and essential to our core mission as a university. We are committed to building a community for existing veterans while continuing to expand their presence on campus, supporting them, and recruiting new veterans to the University of Chicago. The college welcomed 14 student veterans this fall, primarily to the university's partnership with the Posse Foundation. The foundation prepares student veterans for the rigors of college and provides mentoring throughout their undergraduate careers. Bo Butts, Associate Director of Veteran Services and Career Advancement, supports and coordinates services for our student veterans in the college. The university has just recently renewed a 5-year memorandum of understanding that allows active duty National Guards and reservists to participate in the Department of Defense Tuition Assistance Program, and the university is one host of the Various Scholar Project. This intensive academic boot camp offers veterans in-depth college-level reading and writing experience and empowers students with the tools and confidence to succeed in college. I want to highlight some of the initiatives and accomplishments of the Office for Military-Affiliated Communities. The Office for Military-Affiliated Communities partnered with the Diversity and Inclusion Studio to conduct a holistic assessment of student veterans' needs. The findings are informing our efforts to address veterans' intellectual, emotional, financial, and career needs and their family needs. In support and service to our veteran students and their family, the office has reconstituted a Student Veterans of America chapter to connect those student veterans from the college divisions and professional schools. It has organized our military-affiliated alumni to mentor students in the college and created a family readiness program to provide support networks, to provide the well-being of veterans who study and work at the University of Chicago and their families. The Office of Military-Affiliated Communities is engaging in collaborative efforts with our peer institutions as well. Among other things, the office established the Ivy Plus Veterans Administrator Group to facilitate the sharing of insight and best practices. It also joined the Ivy League Veterans Council, a nonprofit focused upon increasing the recruitment of veterans to elite undergraduate programs. The Office for Military-Affiliated Communities has expanded opportunities for the university community to recognize, learn about, and support the members of military-affiliated communities. It now organizes an annual Memorial Day program and has partnered with the law school and law school veterans to bring attention to the military service of female veterans. It has partnered with the School of Social Service Administration to highlight service-connected injuries and their impact among the lives of veterans. And Team River Runner and the Athletics Department support the healing of wounded veterans and veterans with disabilities. Lastly, I'd like to highlight that Terrell Urban has been invited to participate in the American Legion's Military Credentialing Advising Roundtable. He's one of 12 professionals from across the country who will develop recommendations for bridging the gap between military skills and competencies and civilian educational and professional credentials. The recommendations will be offered to the U.S. Department of Defense, Education, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, institutions of higher education, as well as industry leaders. Now let me turn to today's program. Our panel discussion today features faculty members from the Department of Surgery and Pediatrics in a conversation moderated by Chicago Booth alum Patrick Scanlon. They will be introduced by one of our 14 new student veterans, Matthew Stark. Matthew is a first year in the college studying economics. He serves as the Master at Arms for the UChicago Student Veterans of America chapter. He's a U.S. Army veteran who served with the 75th Ranger Regiment and was deployed to Iraq, Syria, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Please join me in welcoming Matthew to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Diermeyer, for the introduction, and to the University of Chicago for such a welcoming environment for student veterans to thrive, share ideas, and integrate our experiences into the campus community. This year has held many firsts for me, and today is one of them. I join the ranks of many of you in this room and can finally call myself a veteran. I meet this new accomplishment with excitement and joy, but am quickly humbled when I remember the veterans in my life. People like my grandparents who served in World War II in Korea, to the veterans that I idolize in my community. It's on days like today that I not only reflect on my newly claimed status, but look towards the shoes that I have to fill. This almost always brings up thoughts of how many veterans have come back from war and had to face adversity on the home front. Everything from non-existent or insufficient benefits to an even less existent support system here at home. I truly believe that many of the luxuries I experience today are a direct result of previous generations' suffering. Standing in front of you now, I can say with confidence that things are getting better. Veteran services in the college and OMAC have removed many perceived barriers and provided access for holistic support and integration into the University of Chicago community. As proof, you can look to the 14 veterans admitted into the undergraduate class of 2023. At UChicago, my student veteran status isn't something I need to hide or be ashamed of. I'm seen as an asset not only to my community, but to society as a whole. I don't have to endure the same burdens of my status like the generations that came before me, not because I'm any more deserving, but because the university has granted me this great opportunity. I feel empowered to be the change I wanted as a child, being granted the opportunity to represent veterans across an entire college campus. My peers and I embrace this honor with pride, integrity, and confidence, and we promise that we will not let you down. On my first Veterans Day, I'm looking forward to future days where we recognize our veterans. I see days where this event will no longer be able to be held in the confines of this room, but one that will bleed across campus and into the lives of its students. Although this might seem like a distant dream to some, this is a living reality for veterans at the University of Chicago today. With the support of the university and surrounding community, I've seen firsthand what the future of Veterans Affairs looks like at this school. Keeping with tradition, it is one that is unique, innovative, and unparalleled to its peers. We've been met with open arms not only by faculty, staff, and administrators, but by the student body, who embraces us and seeks to understand all of our experiences. My initial perceived fear of isolation upon transition out of the military quickly subsided when I took my first steps here on campus. I now see myself not only as a soldier or a ranger, but a veteran scholar and a maroon one at that. I know this is where fun comes to die, but this is where veterans are coming to thrive. Speaking of some of the generations before me, I'm honored to introduce our panelists and moderator for today. Patrick Scanlon graduated from the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business in 1995. He comes from a family of veterans who've served in World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. His grandfather, Arthur Butch Scanlon, played football at for UChicago for Alonzo Stagg in 1913. After graduating West Point, Pat was commissioned an officer and served in the Airborne Division as a Ranger, deploying to West Germany and the Czech border before being discharged as a captain. He's worked in the field of finance for over 20 years for companies like J.P. Morgan, Bear Stearns, Boeing, and his current position at Alex. Brown, a division of Raymond James. Patrick currently serves as the secretary for UChicago's Alumni Military Affinity Group, mentor for the USO's Transition Program, chairperson for the Raymond and James Veteran Network, and advisor to the Office of Military Affiliated Communities. He currently resides in Oak Park, Illinois, with his two daughters, Tate and Geraldine. Dr. Kenneth Wilson, a native of Baltimore, Dr. Wilson is an Emory University grad student who attended medical school at Howard University. He's worked for more than a decade as a trauma and acute care surgeon for both adult and pediatric patients, including more recently at Hurley Hospital in Flint, Michigan as the director of pediatric trauma. He treats all related conditions, including giant ventral hernias, a condition that can occur after abdominal trauma and requires extremely complex surgical procedure. Dr. Wilson has a long history as a military surgeon and is currently a colonel in the United States Army Reserves, where he has multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Dr. Wilson is an active researcher and has been widely published on topics including military trauma and trauma surgical outcomes. He's interested in the association between race and socioeconomic status on trauma-related health outcomes. Dr. Greg Montalto joined the University of Chicago's Biological Science Division in January 2019 as an associate professor of pediatrics after more than 25 years in Navy medicine. In addition to caring for the daughters and sons of soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen, he's deployed on the USNS Comfort as part of Joint Task Force Katrina, to Camp Arif Jan Kuwait in 2006 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and as part of the 2006 Lebanese non-combatant evacuation operation. He also served as 12th Marine Regimental Surgeon from 2007 to 2008, and as Director of Medical Operations on USNS Mercy in 2014 and 2015. In that role, he planned both large-scale and small-scale multilateral medical operations for the 2014 Rim of the Pacific exercise and the 2015 Pacific Partnership Pacific Partnership deployment. Before his retirement, he collaborated with Uganda People's Defense Force, UPDF, to help develop an adolescent HIV treatment clinic at UPDF's main military base. Dr. Montalto joined the University of Chicago's faculty with the goal of using his military experience to develop a trauma-informed, comprehensive, multidisciplinary medical home for adolescents and young adults affected by the community's violence. Finally, Dr. Brian Williams is a surgeon with particular interest in racial inequalities in healthcare, diversity in medical education, and addressing the root causes of gun violence. As a surgeon working the night shift at Parkland Memorial Hospital, he treated victims of the July 7th Dallas police shooting in 2016 and gained national prominence for his public comments about racism, gun violence, and policing. Dr. William holds a BS in aeronautical engineering from the United States Air Force Academy. After receiving his commission as a second lieutenant, he went on to undergraduate pilot training at Williams Air Force Base, Phoenix, Arizona. He then served as the flight test engineer directing classified programs for Air Force special projects. Following his 6 years of military service, he earned an MD from the University of South Florida College of Medicine and completed a general residency at Harvard Medical School, Brigham and Women's Hospital, as well as a fellowship in trauma surgery and surgical critical care at Emory University Grady Memorial Hospital. He was a trauma and acute care surgeon at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, where he taught and mentored students, residents, and fellows. Thank you guys, and happy Veterans Day.
Good afternoon, everybody. While our panelists are taking their seat, I want to thank the provost for his kind remarks and fellow Ranger Stark for his remarks, especially on fun. As we know, University of Chicago fun is not linear. That's a Chicago phrase and only exists here. Being a veteran is all about, as the provost talked about, support. And none of us veterans would be here if it wasn't for the family members or anybody who supported a veteran at any time in their life. So I'd like right now, please, anybody, family member or otherwise, who has supported a veteran to stand up and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a few prepared questions for our panelists, and the first one goes to all of you. Could you please share a little bit about your military service experiences? What was your position? What was your normal day like? And why did you choose to join the military? So, Doctor, you first.
So why did I join? I joined the Navy in the 1980s. It was not because of Top Gun. It is because I just wanted to do something. I had no particular reason. When I went to the Naval Academy, nobody had me pegged as the person who would have been in for more than 5 years. Never. And I outlasted pretty much everybody in my company, and 29 years later, I retired. So I don't know. I don't know why I was there that long, other than I enjoyed it. It was fulfilling. A typical day was, my days were, I'm sorry. My days were made easy because of my wife, Heather, who's there. She rolled her eyes when my tour with 12th Marines, I was there for 12 months. Heather will say, no, it was 14 months. I was away from home. I barely made it home for the birth of our now 11-year-old son, and she kept it together. So more important is, what was her day like? And it was the reason that I was able to serve. So For all the families out there, for all the kids, for all the husbands and wives, thank you, because our military force would be nowhere as effective as it is if it weren't for you. So thank you.
Amen. Dr. Wilson?
Yes. So I was poor. And they projected what my indebtedness would be when I was finishing medical school in DC. And, and back then, being from Baltimore, the Navy was a huge influencer of things that I did. I was a wrestler. I went to Naval Academy wrestling camps. You would read the things up on the gym wall, and they would motivate you. So I always thought the Navy would be a good partnership for me. Kind of that wrestling, nobody's going to beat me mentality. Medical school, I can't afford to be here, but you're still not going to make me leave. And this was before people flew planes into some buildings in New York and bombed the Pentagon. So back then, the motivation was entirely different. So my first deployment was during the surge, during the more senior Bush administration. I graduated July, and I drove back to Atlanta. I'd gone to Emory University, and I was living with my roommate at the time, and I got a cup of coffee. He had a real job, so I went out on the deck, and there were mobilization orders. So I didn't even get 5 minutes. So here it is 18 years later, and I still do it because I love it, and I cannot imagine not doing it. So what's my typical day? My typical day in Kuwait in 2003 was trying to figure out how to do my first job as an attending on an 18-year-old Army Ranger who could bounce a cord off of his belly and being concerned about, did I do the appendectomy right? I mean, you can't mess it up. It's textbook anatomy. And then you get to Iraq, where all of a sudden you go from bullets to IEDs to bombs. And then you have the engine block blowing off a pelvis and trying to figure out how to do that in the middle of a tent in the middle of nowhere. And then the last deployment out in the middle of nowhere under the Afghan-Iranian border, where we had no power, we had no heat, we had nothing. It was expeditionary. So I don't know really what the typical day looks like, other than I can say that the reason that you keep going, and I have a wife to thank who's been through 6 deployments right now as well, and I've missed Christmas and things like this as well. But the reason you keep going is it's because I care. And then why at the University of Chicago? Because I care. And so I can draw a straight line between any mother in a recovery room versus any mother that I ever met sitting back home in the United States. So that's kind of my typical days. The military fills my brain even when I'm on the active duty or civilian side.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Williams?
So I always knew I was going to go in the military. It was never a question in my mind. I come from a long line of veterans. My father was in the Air Force for 23 years. My grandfather and my great-grandfather served in the segregated units in the Army. And true story, my family grew up on a farm in South Carolina. And when World War II broke out, my great-grandfather left to go fight in the war, told my grandfather, his son, "You stay back and watch the farm. You're the only man in the family." He said, "Sure, Dad." Great-grandfather left. He went down, lied about his age, took off to the war as well. Who would know, right? He shows up in his first unit and is in the same unit as his father. He's like, what are you doing here? So, and then that ethos kind of flows to my family. I have aunts and uncles and cousins that have served in all of the branches. My difference was I was the first to go to college and get a commission. So that's where I stood out from my family. I applied to West Point, Naval Academy, and the Air Force Academy. And in the end, I chose the Air Force because that's what I knew. I knew Air Force Blue. I liked airplanes, and that's what I did. When I was in the service, I was an aeronautical engineer, and I did flight tests. So my typical days, as we discussed, those were classified. These were working on with technology that was just, amazing technology and amazing people doing things that I miss to this day. To be in that sort of high pressure, high stakes, and given a blank check to say, okay, go do this and see if you can make this work. And I missed using that part of my my brain. However, that discipline I carried over with me into medicine when I decided to change careers. And I found that camaraderie and that work ethic and that singular focus on serving something higher than yourself is something that an ethos that serves me well as a physician now. And Ken and I are both trauma surgeons in the same group, so we can speak the same language without actually saying any words, which is good for him since he's Army and his vocabulary is limited.
Oh, it's going to be like that. Okay. Let me get ready.
But and lastly, I went to get back into the reserves probably about 6-7 years ago, and met my commander, took my physical, and was working on quibbling about what my rank would be. He wants me to be an 04. I'm like, I want to be an 05. And then July 7th happened, then kind of everything went off the rails after that point. So I'm still looking to get back into the reserves and do my part to serve.
Thank you. And a common theme I'm hearing is the thing I like to always say, veterans are always serving, whether it's at work or at home or in the community. And thank you all for that. Dr. Montalto, for you, based on your experiences as a physician, as a veteran, what do you see as your experiences in the military and how they overlap as your role as a physician?
Heather will tell you that I was very influenced by my tour with 12th Marines, which is a mid-career thing, and it was career-changing to me. I was a general pediatrician who did a lot of things other than pediatrics, because the Navy will say, hey, go to Kuwait, and you go to Kuwait and you take care of adults. But the tour with 12th Marines was what got me to want to take care of adolescents. And any Marine out there, any FMF corpsman out there knows that Marines are adolescents. And I say that completely lovingly. It was career changing. I would go back in a heartbeat. It was a career changing and life changing tour. Marines also are very good at taking care of each other. And if you go to a meal like this, the last people to eat are the senior officers, because they want to make sure that everybody has something to eat. So how do you translate that into medicine? And that is making sure that you are looking out for and taking care of everybody. It's, the face of the clinic is the person who picks up the phone. The nurse back in my clinic in San Diego, Millie and Deb, they were the face of the clinic, and they were the people who the patients would reach out to and trusted. And so it's making sure that, even though I'm in a position of, being an associate professor, that is meaningless if we are not looking at the people who make everything work, that put everything together. And so, of all of the things that I picked up along the way in my military career, just looking out for each other and making sure that, nobody on that team is insignificant, and, and applying that to my job every day.
Thank you very much. Dr. Wilson, for yourself, there's some upcoming plans for the hospital, specifically the trauma center, which we talked about, and it becoming more military friendly. Can you tell us about some of those initiatives, and how does your experience as a veteran and your current drilling reservist, by the way, experiences help shape those goals?
It's funny, before we started, all three of us were talking about our time in Hawaii, and none of us look at it, we suffered in Hawaii. And so that's where I was when the University of Chicago called me. Playing on the beach, literally living 300 yards with nothing between us and the Pacific Ocean. And then got the call about coming here. And I think, as you said, you're always in service.
Yeah.
So you can break it down to something very simple, since apparently my English is not very good. That if there's a mission, then we got to go do that.
Right.
And if you're telling me there are people dying on the south side, well, we got to go fix that. And so that's easily translated in my brain as to how you leave, a perfect paradise on a perfect little rock in the middle of the Pacific to come back here to do that. One of the things that I also think, if the medical corps had a Marines attached other than the Navy, I probably would have done the same thing. So what I would hear a lot in Chicago, University of Chicago, when I first got here is, well, if you do this, this will take this away from me. And if you don't do that, then I have to start late. And if I had to have a phrase that best describes me, as my kids would probably tell you, it's, I care, but I really don't care, right? So I care about you, and because I care, I'm gonna just let you know how you're wrong, because I don't care about you because you're standing in front of taking care of somebody's life. So I think that has kind of become the swag that we have now at the University of Chicago. We don't wait for somebody to come in from home, a snowy day like this. Yep. You don't have time for the cardiothoracic surgeon, the vascular surgeon to come in. You better learn every operation there is to do, which is a military translation. No one's coming to that FST out in the middle of Vietnam. No one's coming to that FST out in Afghanistan. So that sets up perfectly the military introduction to the University of Chicago, because they see it very clearly that we have a way not only to make ourselves better because of the substrate of being on the south side of Chicago and unfortunately intentional violence, but if we're going to train people who are at a disciplined population at Fort Benning and Annapolis, you're not going to get that experience. So we're going to provide that experience for you. So I think it's a great segue into having the military come here. So this summer we will have surgeons, ER doctors, ER physicians, techs, and I'm probably missing some CRNAs who will come and get our experience and then take it out to the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. Dr. Williams, for you, during the intro there was a mention about this incident in Dallas, a police shooting, and where you were serving as a trauma physician during this time. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how your military time prepared you for that, and feel free to elaborate.
Well, I answered the last question first, how the military time prepared me for that, and the military prepared me for pretty much everything. Once you climb that mountain once, it seems like there's nothing insurmountable. And to piggyback on what Dr. Wilson said, when there are obstacles, you don't say we can't do that. Military folks just find a way to make it happen somehow, some way. Even if it's under duress, you'll get it done. And going back to the July 7th night, the Dallas police shooting, if you're not familiar with it, is the worst loss of life for law enforcement in the US since 9/11. This was a peaceful protest in downtown Dallas that was protesting police use of force, deadly force against black men and women. And there was a black sniper there that night, was targeting white police officers and shot 12 officers. 7 were brought to the hospital where I was working that night as a trauma surgeon in-house. And this was my night off. I switched at the last second with my partner who had some other kind of conflict. So when I was there, my wife was she was kind of lost because she didn't know where I was that night. But this became an international news event. At the time that this was happening, we in the hospital had no idea what was happening. There were just police officers showing up in their squad cars because their partners would pick them up off the ground, put them in a squad car, and just take off to the hospital. Some showed up on their rims with sparks flying. And our hospitals prepared for this. We just kind of flexed into our mass casualty response. But because of the nature of what was happening downtown, we had what we called a code yellow. So the hospital police secured the hospital, and they're walking around with AR-15s and body armor. And if you're visiting, you could not walk the halls. So it was just on lockdown. So if you want to use these military-esque references, it was sort of like that. It was that sort of level of security and activity. But for us, when you're trained to do something, you would just respond in a crisis by falling back on your training. You don't take an inventory of your emotions, and I'm sure everybody in this room can relate to that. I've been trained to do X, Y, and Z. No matter how much chaos and noise is around me, I become hyper-focused on my job. So the military had trained me to do that during that time period. The second thing was to ensure that you look after your people during the situation. So we had 3 fatalities that evening out of the 7 officers that came by. And there's medical students and nurses that were students, high school students that were shadowing that I'd never seen somebody die, never seen blood, and this is their exposure to that, right? So I had to stop and talk to them and say, okay, how are you doing? Let's talk this out, go take some time. So if you become focused on yourself, you forget your team around you. So the military taught me about that as well, responding in a crisis, but also looking out for your team. So the last is myself, right? Which I did a horrible job of that. Let's just be straight about that. I was so focused on everything else that I kind of left myself out of the entire picture. But I'm grateful for the military experience that I had in that when disaster struck, there was no breakdown in what I was supposed to do. Just respond, do what you do, look out for your people, and get the mission done. Because in the end, if we can't function, then people will suffer.
Thank you. Great answer. And it's nice to hear veterans talk about the same attributes of character, which we all speak that language. And again, all those attributes come from the family unit. So again, thank you for all those family and those who have supported veterans. Our final question to all 3 of you. You all are here at the University of Chicago. We'd like to hear about your experience at University of Chicago and what things you'd like to see in programming or any of the military initiatives, military affinity group initiatives you'd like to see. Dr. Montano.
I'm just learning the University of Chicago, and I am meeting a lot of fantastic people. I can tell you that in my everyday job, one of the more difficult things is that I have to pick out my clothes every day instead of wearing the same uniform. But the one thing that I don't have to pick out is I have a Naval Academy lanyard that I put my ID on. And, part of it's corny. It's like, yeah, the corny retired Navy guy is wearing this lanyard. But it gets a lot of comments from patients. And it's whether I'm seeing patients at, Comer Children's Hospital or if I'm seeing patients at Friend Health on Cottage Grove. A lot of people say, oh, you were in the Navy. And either it was, I was in the Army, and then it turns kind of to a, back and forth. But I also feel that there are a number of military families who are out there. And I think that one of the things that I would love to see is for us to be able to reach out and connect. And, when I worked in, at Naval Medical Center San Diego or at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, or National Naval Medical Center, which I still call it, it was a foregone conclusion that you show up to a military clinic and you're military affiliated. And so we provided certain services and a certain type of understanding to the patients who came through those doors. And, after almost a year here, I'm realizing that there are a lot of families in the Southside community who are the same way, who have a parent who has been deployed or who is deployed. Or a kid who is in high school who's thinking of enlisting or thinking of, looking at a commissioning program, and reaching out to those people, to those families, and finding out how the university, how we collectively, as a veterans group within the university, can better reach and serve those people. Because, all of us in this room understand that, it's not easy. A lot of it is fantastic. I would not have traded the last 29 years for anything, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't challenging from time to time. And I can tell you, when people would reach out and help, it made all the difference in the world. And so I think that is one of the things that I would love to see.
Thank you. Dr. Wilson?
Well, I'm in love with the University of Chicago, but not necessarily as much as love as I could be if it was 90 degrees on the beach. Why? But one of the things that was very nice when we arrived by opening up the trauma center was, I call this one of these, tree-hugging liberal universities, which I so love because I went to a Quaker school. So,
Right.
we all want, as a high school student. So I love the thought process that we can save the world. And so when we opened up the trauma center, it was really, if you look at the history of it, it was done about advocacy, about the community on the South Side looking at people were bleeding in the drawbridge. This castle had not been down, and eventually the people got involved. And, and I'd be remiss, and I'm sure it's part of Terrell's program, but to my left here, we have a World War II veteran. So I'd just like to give him a round of applause. And so for me, historically, I like history. I look at, as Brian mentioned, he had family who fought before there was, an integrated unit. So places like this make changes, social changes like that. And they have the infrastructure to do so with the amount of monies that come in. So specifically to the military side of things, I would like to see one of two things. I would like to see people who are disenfranchised not be disenfranchised. And I think the best place to do that is the military. I'd like to see them not necessarily go in as people who are always enlisted, but give them the ability to go in as a commissioned officer and have a head start since they're actually starting behind the finish line. I think also because I have gone downrange with little to nothing and would like to have ingenuity come out of this. Every time there's a conflict, we learn something. For instance, the police shooting in Dallas, many lives are saved because you put a tourniquet on someone's leg, right? We have Stop the Bleed program in Chicago because a tourniquet saved lives downrange, and it now saves lives at home. We, at the University of Chicago, when we operate on someone, we can close all of their abdomens because we use pretty much a whole blood equivalent versus giving crystalloid, which is an advancement from Vietnam. And so we're probably the only center that I can tell right now that I can brag upon. We've had no complications from open abdomens. So that's it. So that's innovation here. So now, my last part of that is, why not make this a hub for what Brian mentioned too about being aeronautical? Yeah. Why not have it that we are creating ways, not just on the social setting of these kids, but people's kids at home? So I like to see the research towers that we use attached to the medical school to have DoD grant funding to study things that could save lives on the battlefield, that could save lives as we get away from war, hopefully, and start doing things in underdeveloped nations that happen because we have DoD funding or more infrastructure surrounding these things that we could actually get from the federal government. And that is actually what I think will happen. So I'm hopeful that it'll happen sooner than later.
Thank you. Dr. Williams?
I came here, I'm mission focused, and I'm just laser focused on how I can contribute to ending the healthcare inequities in South Chicago. That's what brought me here. And I should really say, my wife said it was okay for us to move here. I had to get permission to come here, because you've got to bring the family as well. But that's why I'm here. And since I've arrived, I got here in June. It's been 4 or 5 months now. I've been overwhelmingly impressed by the welcome I've received from everyone at the University of Chicago. I came, admin, clinical staff, but I've been very impressed by the Office of Military, I'm going to get the name wrong, Terrell's office.
Terrell, yeah.
Because I immediately felt like I had a family. And when you think about how much time I can spend devoting to activities on the campus, I have to take care of patients. I have to, do education. But the other things that I can devote my time to, I've decided that this is something I want to give some of my time to. I want to spend more time with this organization. And that's just because of the welcome and the warmth I felt from day one of arriving here. So I plan to donate my free time any way possible to be engaged in this organization and then spread its message and mission.
Thank you. And with that concludes our questions. And to that point, thank you for all those who provided for all the logistics to provide for this event today. And Terrell, it's yours.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much. And Dr. Williams, we will be calling you, sir. So sticking with tradition, we want to be able to give the panelists and the moderator a token of our appreciation from the Office of Military Affiliated Communities. But I'm going to need a little help, and I want to throw a number out there. Everybody knows 60 to 52, that Navy's up, right? Football, all right? But
so got this year.
This year. We got to bring up my colleague from the Office of Veteran Services and Career Advancement. Captain Bo Butts is the Associate Director in Veteran Services in the college's Career Advancement Department, where he manages a one-stop shop for undergraduate student veterans and the ROTC population. Bo served a total of 9 years as an active duty officer in the U.S. Army, ranging from civil military operations to company executive officer, and as a commanding officer in 2 separate billets. He deployed twice to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation New Dawn, and later deployed to Ethiopia, where he led U.S. military and diplomatic missions alongside the Ethiopian National Defense Forces. Bo was awarded 2 Bronze Star medals, a Meritorious Service Medal, and a Combat Action Badge. And he holds a knighthood in the Armor and Cavalry Association Order of St. George. Everybody, please welcome me and join Captain Bo Butts. So again, we'd like to thank our panelists and our moderators for an excellent job today on behalf of the Office of the Provost's Office for Military Affiliated Communities. We'd like to present each of them again with a token of our gratitude and for their service and taking their time out of their busy schedules. As you guys just heard, they're pretty very important.
Thanks,
lives.
Appreciate it.
So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrell, and thanks once again to our wonderful panel. I can tell you, as a combat arms guy, that surgeons and the medical teams and our medics and everything else, my God, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that myself and my men would be lost without you. So a quick round of applause for our medical staff. I have a lot of brothers and sisters that are still with us, thanks to the amazing work that you all and your profession do. So thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Happy Veterans Day. It's such a genuine pleasure to see everyone gathered here today, and specifically a day that constitutes more than just a sale at the local department store. This is an actual meaningful and impactful event, and a rare opportunity, I think, for us to come together as a community in support and recognition of our veterans. So thank you for coming. I'm so humbled to see a turnout of campus and community leaders here today. And in the US, we see a growing division in the civil-military gap that emerges, with less than 1%, 0.68 by some estimates, actually actively serving and seeking to prevent and protect the freedoms and liberties of 99.32% of the rest of us. In communities, veterans account for just under 6% of our citizens, and their small numbers, along with the countless sacrifices made by those who serve, along with their families, are just part of what makes them such a treasure. This is one of the things that makes it such a unique privilege to continue my service right here at UChicago, and I know Terrell feels the same way, where our initiatives such as the Veteran Scholars Program, along with the way the university is assembling in support of our veterans with meaningful, impactful work, broadcasts to our nation that veterans are not only welcome at UChicago, they belong on our campus. With so many veterans gathered here today, I'd like to ask that if anyone who has served, please stand so we can acknowledge you. If you can remain standing real quick, I'd also like to ask that if anyone who has a family member who's a veteran, if you could please join our service members in standing and be acknowledged. And lastly, at this time, I would like to invite everyone to join those standing on your feet as we recognize you in gratitude for your support of our veterans and for joining us here today. So thank you. While everyone is standing, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge those who are not able to be with us here today and draw your attention to the small table set for one that's in the middle of the room. This table honors those service members who are missing in action or prisoners of war. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their intention to respond to their country's call to arms. The single red rose displayed in a vase reminds us of the families and loved ones of our comrades in arms who keep the faith awaiting their return. The ribbon tied on the vase is reminiscent of the ribbon worn on the lapel of those who bear witness to their unyielding determination and to demand a proper accounting for our missing. The candle is lit, symbolizing the upward reach of their unconquerable spirit. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of their bitter fate. There is salt upon the bread plate, symbolic of the family's tears as they wait. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us tonight. The chair is empty. They are not here. All of you who served with them and called them comrades, who depended upon their might and aid and relied upon them, do not forsake them, for surely they have not forsaken you. Let us pause in remembrance. Until the day they come home, remember. Please be seated. I would now like to introduce Anita Smith, Finance Manager at the University of Chicago Law School, a U.S. Army veteran and a spouse of a U.S. Army veteran. Anita Smith was actively contributed to the University of Chicago for 13 years, stewarding financial management at both University Communications and currently the University of Chicago Law School, and working with staff to launch new and innovative financial modeling and projectment model tools. She has worked on veterans initiatives for the university since its conception in 2010 and currently serves as a founding member of the university's Veteran and Family Readiness Program, as well as being an advisor to OMAC. Anita leads efforts to recognize and enhance visibility for veterans and attract talented veterans to join the community, encouraging veteran outreach across the university and throughout Chicago, helping to strategically implement resources for the families within the military-affiliated community. She is a member of the Midwest Finance Association and Veterans Leadership Council. She is passionate about and committed to helping others. She is often sought after for presenting various events throughout the Chicagoland area and for veterans and their families. Please join me in welcoming Anita Smith.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Anita Smith, and I am a U.S. Army veteran and a spouse of a U.S. Army veteran. My husband, he is a 100% disabled vet. I am also a member of the University of Chicago's Veterans and Family Readiness Program, which is a network of internal and external agencies that help us sustain a quality of life for veterans and their families while they pursue their educational goals and professional careers at UChicago. I'm excited to partner with Sarita Conley, if you could just wave your hand, from Blue Star Families on this initiative, and look forward to expanding opportunities for military families. I'm looking forward to expanding opportunities for military families in her new role as Chief Operating Officer for Bunker Labs. As a military spouse and veteran, I know firsthand how the support from internal and external communities are vital towards sustaining a high quality of life. Services provided for military-affiliated communities are not intended to be a handout, but a hand up. As veterans and their families make their transition into the civilian lifestyle, and UChicago Veterans and Family Readiness Program stands ready to assist. I would also like to thank you, Terrell, from OMAC, for his diligence in creating this culture that embraces the military-affiliated community. As other speakers have talked about today, families and the support of our communities is very important. I have been here for over a decade and worked on many veteran initiatives, and to see how the students, alumni, faculty, staff, and community partners have come together really brings joy to my heart. Note that Terrell, he's very humble, but he's really done all of this in less than a year being at the University of Chicago. Let's just give him a hand. For me, being a veteran doesn't just mean that we simply served our country. It means that we served an institution that promotes American ideals of freedom and democracy around the world. Our nation, if challenged, will summons the integrity and dedication of the world's most elite fighting force, the U.S. military. And at any time, each service member and veteran, whether sailor, soldier, airman, or Marine, have already endorsed a check, including up to the cost of their lives to defend our freedoms. As we close out our program today, we would like to thank several partners who have made UChicago's veterans programming and initiatives a success this year. Our partners at iHouse, Denise Jorgens, Deb Jasinski, Hannah Barton, and Alexandra Erickson. Their unwavering commitment to supporting military-affiliated students on campus is unparalleled, and we thank you for your continued support and the use of this beautiful space to host our events. Our partners who co-hosted our increased Veterans Day recognition programming this year: the Office of the Provost, the School of Social Service Administration, the Law School and the Law School Veterans, Student Health and Counseling Services with Dr. Aaron Hurst, the University of Chicago Medical Center, the Office of the University of Events and Ceremonies, Julie Krause and Nicole Ruiz, the Office of the University Registrar with Scott Campbell, Joanne Creviston, and Mary Stufchick, the Office of Civic Engagement, Alumni Relations and Development, and of course, Equal Opportunity Programs with Bridget Collier, Scott Velasquez, Mitchell Kitloss, and Terrell Odom. Thank you again to our moderator, Patrick, and panelists for sharing their experiences raising awareness for veterans and the veteran initiatives at UCMC and within the UChicago Military Affinity Group. Thank you to the University Veterans and Family Readiness Program for supporting military-affiliated families. Thank you to all the brave service members and veterans for their sacrifice for our freedoms. We will close the program today with the singing of America the Beautiful by Reverend James Beatty.
Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty, above the fruitless plains. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown our good with brotherhood, from sea to shining seas.
Thank